Well, here's the thing. The more you want, the more trapped you get into it, right? People wanting, I want this, I want that. Well, that can become a really dangerous treadmill to get on. I think people can a lot of times confuse achievement with fulfillment.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Dave Albin. Dave was born in 1954 at Queen of Angels Hospital in Hollywood, California, to a single mom. He was adopted by his aunt and uncle on his mother's side at the age of 5. His adoptive parents told Dave they were not his parents at the age of 11. Later that year, both his adoptive parents started drinking. This is where Dave's life took a hard turn. Dave tried alcohol at the age of 12, and by the time he was 14, he was experimenting with hard drugs. Grossly addicted to drugs and alcohol, he joined AA some 20 years later in June 1988. This is when Dave was introduced to the personal development industry. He attended a seminar with Tony Robbins in 1995 and did his first Firewalk. Dave went on to work for Tony Robbins for just shy of 20 years as Tony's Firewalk captain. Dave retired from Anthony Robbins Companies in 2014, shortly after Google hired him to put on an event for them in Mountain View, California corporate headquarters. Firewalk Productions, LLC, was born in 2014. Dave has done gigs for NASA, Heineken, the Entrepreneurs Organization, Remax, Chick-fil-A, Tony Robbins, and many others. Dave currently lives in the Appalachian Mountains in Ashe County, North Carolina. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Dave. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Thanks, Dwight. You said it right. You got the Appalachian thing right, bro.
Yeah, well, clock's always right twice a day if it's dead, right? So
that's right.
At least I can fall into that category and be right the odd time.
Yeah,
so
you did good, man. You did good.
It's a pleasure having you on the show, Dave. After reading a little bit about you and researching you yesterday before I was building what I wanted to, the flow of the show to go, it's not very often in life that you find somebody that in their life in their career that ends up getting into what you've gotten into with the start of your life, from being adopted to getting involved in drugs and alcohol. But you know what? I know there's so much more involved in that story of that little blurb that I just read that the listeners and people watching heard. So one of the things I focus on, Dave, is a person's origin story, their earliest recollections from, little wee Dave from his earliest recollections all the way up to where you are today. So could you do me a favor, please, Dave, and share with me what you feel comfortable, of course, on your origin?
Well, when I was born to a single mom, and she had 2 other boys at the time from a different man. They had a different father. My biological father was a pilot in Korea. And I'm not really sure, Dwight, what happened, but he hit his head somehow. And they put a plate in his head to save his life. Well, it also ended up taking his life because he lived with a tremendous amount of pain from that plate. And 2 months before I was born, he turned to my mom and said, I'm going to the grocery store. And she never saw or heard from him again. So based on his comments about the pain and how he didn't know how much longer he could take it, we kind of assumed that he committed suicide because, again, we never heard from him again. So I was born at Queen of Angels Hospital, Hollywood, California. And so my two brothers, my cousin, my grandmother, and my biological mother all lived in a one-bedroom apartment right very close to Hollywood High School, right down the street from Hollywood Boulevard. Mom worked at the Roosevelt Hotel. My mom was also Rosie the Riveter in back in the days of World War II, right? So when we went to war as a baby boomer, my mom was working for McDonnell Douglas, and she helped build airplanes like a lot of the women did, right? Women did everything when the men went off to war. So that was the era that I was born into. Well, when I was 5, mom just couldn't do it. She just, we were making ends, well, she was not making ends meet. And so she did a very loving thing. She put me up for adoption, and and her sister, my aunt and uncle, adopted me. And they moved me from Hollywood to Long Beach, California. And that was at 5. And by the time I was 11, 12 years old, they started drinking again. Now, they had sworn off drinking when they adopted me. And then on the first day of summer in 1964, the very first day, they brought me in the kitchen, set me down, and said, David, we need to tell you something. And my mom put her hand on my hand, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she said, David, what we have to tell you is we're not your parents. Well, at 11 years old, you can't comprehend that. You don't know it. You don't even know what that means. And so my life took an interesting turn at that point. Shortly thereafter, Dwight, they started drinking. Now, I had sworn off when I was adopted at 5. And now, after they told me that, they both started drinking again. Now, this is coming out of 1963. In November of 63, Kennedy had been assassinated. My dad was a military officer, highly decorated in World War II, and he was also consulting in the Pentagon. So he was very concerned about what was going on in the world. The Bay of Pigs had just happened. The missiles were in Cuba. All that was going on. So I don't know if it was the stress of that, Dwight. I don't know. I just know that they both started drinking shortly after they told me that I was adopted. And that's when, my life took a hard turn. I went from being like the perfect family to all hell was breaking loose. Well, one day they both left. I think they went to the grocery store somewhere. And, they did that back in the 60s. You'd call the neighbor across the street and say, hey, Joanne, Bob and I are going to the grocery store. David's at home. If he needs something, can he come knock on your door? And of course, all the neighbors said, yeah, of course, just if he needs anything, have him come across the street. Well, we did that back then. That was perfectly fine. It was totally acceptable. And so when they left, I went over to the cabinet where the booze was, and I opened it up and I pulled out a bottle, a half gallon of brandy. Because I don't know what this stuff is. I have no references for it. I just know they were drinking it, and it was really turning them into pretty nasty people. Well, I took a coffee cup about this size, poured it in there, about a half a cup, and drank it. It tasted horrible. But you know what, Dwight? I never had a chance. I believe that I was an alcoholic right on the spot the moment that alcohol entered my body, because I started to think alcoholically from the very beginning. And it felt like rocket fuel when I drank it. It was exhilarating. And then I started acting like an alcoholic. I was chasing it. I was hiding it. I was stealing it. And then it just progressed. And then in school, I started hanging around with the wrong crowd. I got involved with hard drugs, cocaine, alcohol, and it just progressed. It just, it never got better. By the time I got to high school, by the time I was a junior, I got kicked out of school. And then it just, to move it forward, on June 8th of 1988, I woke up that morning and I said, we're done. That's it. I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. I was in so much physical and emotional pain that I needed to stop it. And the only idea I had was to put a bullet in my head. At the time, I was married to a woman who had 3 kids. They were my stepkids. And But that morning, I'm like, well, I don't know anything other to do other than put a bullet in my head. So I loaded my pistol, put it in my mouth. I'm getting ready to pull the trigger. And all of a sudden it dawns on me that when I do that, that I was living in the basement. The rest of the family was upstairs. They didn't want anything to do with me. And I remember thinking, man, when you do that, that's going to cause all kinds of havoc on these kids. That's going to be really one ugly sight. I didn't even know what PTS did what it was back then, but I knew that it was going to affect them emotionally. The police are coming, the morgue's coming, it's going to be in the newspaper, all the neighbors are going to know, it's going to permeate through the school. And I'm like, you can't do that. I really love the kids. And I just remember thinking, it's not fair. You cannot do that. And then I thought, well, just go out in the woods and do it. That way you don't have to do it in the house. And I'm like, no, that's just geographical location change. They're still going to have to deal with the aftermath of that. Well, the next thing I know, I've got this thought in my head to call Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, here's the interesting part about that, Dwight. I didn't know who AA was. I had no references at all. I didn't know anybody that was in AA. I'd never really heard of AA. I had no idea, yet there they were in my head. And so I called information, 411, got the number. I called them, and I got a lady on the phone who started talking to me, and she would listen to what I was telling her, that I believed I was an alcoholic and I needed help and all these things. And I affectionately refer to her as Madge. I don't know if that's her actual name or not, but here's what's really, really interesting. And that is, she talked like this. and I think she must have smoked 2 packs of, Pall Mall non-filters every day, because that's what was wrong with her voice. But that sweet soul got enough information for me and made a decision to get someone to come pick me up. And that's what happened. Next thing I know, there's a guy at my door. His name's Lauren. He gets me in the car. He takes me to an AA meeting, an all men's group in Fairfax, Virginia. And I went to 4 meetings that day. I went to a 12:30, a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30 meeting. And what they did, those men just grabbed me and held on to me tightly. They gave me a big book of AA, and they wrote their name and they put their telephone number in there. And it said at the bottom of the book, before you take that next drink, call one of us. They also gave me a Living Sober book, did the same thing. So when I went home that night, I guess I had just about enough AA not to take a drink that night. Though I wanted to. Trust me, I was miserable. Alcoholism, when you get off, you can die of delirium and tremors. So, and I didn't go to rehab or any of that. I probably should have, but I didn't. The next day at 8 o'clock in the morning, a guy from one of the members, John, called me. And he's all enthusiastic. He's been in AA for a while, so he's living happy, joyous, and free. And he's like, hey, good morning, Dave. How you doing? And I'm thinking, what do you mean, how am I doing? I want to kill somebody. And I might start with you, right? And he's like, yeah. Just relax. He said, listen, I'm going to come get you. Let's go to breakfast, and I want to take you to a meeting. And that's really when I went, wow, here's some stranger that's willing to do that. And yeah, they're willing to do that because they have a responsibility. And I'll talk more on that in a minute. And so there I am, day 2. Well, day 2 turned into a week. A week turned into a month, and they gave me a medallion, a little round coin that said, 30 days of sobriety, 1 month. Then I got one at 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then 1 year. And that's, was just the idea of not taking a drink or a drug for 1 year seemed impossible, had just become a reality. Well, because I had insomnia during this process, I was up late at night all the time. My sleep patterns were all over the place. And one night I'm up late and I'm watching an infomercial. And you might be able to guess who I'm watching. Gunther Ranker, the man himself, Tony Robbins, a young, enthusiastic Tony Robbins, is selling his program. It's called Personal Power. And it's a 30-day program. And to date this, Dwight, it came on these little white things called cassette tapes. And it's funny because some of your listeners won't even know what those are. They'll probably have to Google it.
There's a lot that don't even know what a CD is, for goodness.
Right, exactly. That was way before the CDs or 8 tracks or 4 tracks, right? Anyway, I went through Tony's program and I did what the man taught me to do, and it worked. I started being, and so I got AA on one hand, putting my life together, taking care of the wreckage of the past. And now I've got the personal development industry coming together in my life at the same time, which I will tell you is a pretty magical experience. Well, one of my buddies in AA is like, what's going on with you, man? You're starting a new business. You're real enthusiastic. You look good. You're working out. I mean, what's going on, man? And I go, well, I bought this program and I went through it and I did what the guy taught me to do and I made a lot of changes. And he's like, well, what's the program? And I said, it's Personal Power by Tony Robbins. And he goes, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe, I'd love to know more about that. And I said, well, look, I'm finished with the program. I'll loan it to you. It's $179 or $169. No sense you spend it, borrow mine. And so I gave it to him. Well, he went through it too. And again, this is in 88, maybe the first of 89, January of 89, something like that. Well, 7 years later, 1995, my buddy calls me on the phone and he goes, dude, did you know that Tony Robbins is coming to town? And I said, no, I had no clue. And he goes, come on, man, let's go. You got me into this. You got to go with me. And so I'm like, well, what's the date? And I go, okay, I'm available. And he goes, fantastic. He goes, look, man, I just wanted to make sure you'd go with me. I'll call you back. I'll make all the arrangements. Okay. Well, heck, he calls me back an hour later and he goes, done. Here's what they told us to do. Number one, drink a lot of water. Stay hydrated. You're going to need to stay hydrated. Number two, bring snacks because you're going to spend a lot of time in the room. What an understatement that was. He said, bring a good attitude and be ready to play full out. And I said, Dan, so how much was the ticket? He said, $700. And I went, okay, well, don't you worry, $700, I'll play full out, which is like what, $7,000 now, I guess? I don't know.
Oh, easily.
Easily, right? So he's getting ready to get off the phone and he goes, oh, by the way, I left out the most important part. And I'm like, what? He goes, we're going to be doing a firewalk. And I remember thinking, oh, hell no. You are out of your ever-loving mind. Now, this is what I'm thinking. I'm not saying that, but what's interesting about that, Dwight, is I'm saying no to something. I don't know what a firewalk is. I've never heard it before. I have no references for that, but it didn't sound like anything I was interested in doing. So I remember thinking, yeah, sure, Dan, no problem. Firewalk. That sounds great. Well, I hung up the phone and said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm sure that's just for the crazies. I want to see Tony, no doubt about that, but I'm not going to do this firewalk. I'll sit on the sidelines for that one. Well, the day comes for the event and we get there and we get seated and Tony takes the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon. And the next thing we know, it's after midnight. I'm in a room. We've all been in a room. By the way, there's 3,500 people at this event. And I've been in a room with Tony Robbins for 10 hours. Bring snacks. You're going to need them. And so the next thing you know, Tony goes, take your shoes off. And I'm like, oh, no. No, pal. You're not going to trick me. I ain't doing that. I'm smarter than that. Well, as I'm sitting there, I'm watching everybody else and they're taking their shoes off. And I'm like, oh, well, hell. If I don't take my shoes off, they're all going to know I'm a coward. So I'll just take my shoes off and fake it. Well, as he prepares you to go outside into this big parking lot where the firewalk is going to take place, he gets everybody chanting, right? So everybody's clapping and chanting, going, yes, yes, yes. And we're all walking outside, 3,500 people. So it's pretty loud. It's pretty intense. Well, to kick it up a notch, to set the ambiance, when you get out there, he's got African drummers, right? So now it's dun, 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 and everybody's clapping. And it's unlike anything you could ever imagine, Dwight. It's insanely intense. Well, what they did was earlier in the day, they built this giant fire over here in the parking lot. And that fire, the fire pit, if they call it, it's about 30 feet wide and it's about 60, 70 feet long. So they just burn it all day. They just keep adding wood, adding wood, adding wood. And at the end of the night, they have this giant pile of the most beautiful coals you've ever seen in your life. Well, what they did there was they would load those coals in wheelbarrows. And then they would take a wheelbarrow and they would lay 2 lanes of sod of grass on both sides. And that fire lane is about 3 feet wide, 18 feet long. And so what they did, they just took a flathead shovel and they sprinkled the coals over the top of that grass, and that's what you walked on. Well, as I said earlier, I'm out. I'm not doing this firewalk. So I figure I'll just go hide in the back. I'll be good. Nobody's going to know I'm there other than me. And I'll be good to go. I can weather the storm here. Well, Tony knows this is an incredible life-changing experience. He did his research. He knows this is an experience that's been around for 1,000 years, and he knows it's going to create a paradigm shift. He knows this can literally be one of the top experiences in your life. So he wants to make sure everybody has an opportunity to do it. So he knows people are going to hide in the back. So he trains people to go get them, right? So the next thing I know, I'm in the back, and all of a sudden, here comes this guy out of nowhere, and he makes eye contact with me. Well, I think Tony also teaches them, look, once you make eye contact with him, don't take your eyes off him. Because once this guy looked at me, he's coming at me, and he's not taking his eyes off me. And he gets about, I don't know, maybe 20 feet away, and he kind of looks at me real strange, like kind of leans into me, and he goes, "Are you okay?" And of course, when we're not okay, what do we say? "Oh, I'm fine. Yep, all good here, buddy. Yeah, you go. You go about your business, man. I'm good." Well, at that point, he says, "So are you going to walk tonight?" And I kind of like, "Are you an idiot? Are you crazy?" I'm like, "Didn't you get the memo?" And I said to him with a lot of voice inflection, I'm like, "Absolutely not." And he goes, "Hey, man, that's cool." He goes, "Listen, man, we don't want you to do anything you don't want to do." And I remember thinking, okay, that's cool. I like this guy. He's going to get me out of here. Well, here comes the curveball, right? Because I don't know who this guy is to this day. I'd love to thank him because I wouldn't be on your podcast, Dwight, if I hadn't. This guy changed my life forever with one question. One stranger, one question changed my life and the direction of my life altogether. And he said, "Well, wouldn't you at least like to watch?" And I thought, yeah, let's do that. I'd love to watch these people burn their feet off. Well, to set the stage, I'm in the back, right? I got 3,500 people in front of me. I can't see anything. I'm 100 yards from where they're actually firewalking. I can hear them, obviously they're clapping, they're chanting, the drums are going, people are starting to yell and scream and celebrate, and all this is going on, but I can't see anything. And he said, "Well, listen, just get in line," right? And eventually you'll be able to get up there, you'll be able to see it. Now, in his defense, he's telling the truth, but he wanted to get me in line. He knew. So I get in line, I'm kind of walking along, and all of a sudden this guy comes up to me and he whispers in my ear. And he says, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And then poof, he just disappeared into the night. It's like, what was that? Who, what, where, what is going on? Well, I get a little further, right? I still can't see in front of me because there's just a sea of people, but I can see at an angle. And I look and they're doing it. Every age, every creed, color, person, young, old, big, tall, Dwight, they're doing it. They're firewalking. And so my brain is freaking. I have no references for this. I'm like, what is going on? Why are they doing this? What's wrong with these people? Metaphorically, what is that? And so I'm mesmerized. It's like, looking at a car wreck. You can't take your eyes off it, right? And I'm just staring and I'm watching these people firewalk. And I'm mesmerized. I'm in a trance and I'm just staring. And the next thing I know, boom, guess where I am?
Front of the line.
I'm at the front of the line. And all of a sudden I look down in that lane of sod that's 3 feet wide, 18 feet long. They sprinkle the coals on. I'm staring at those coals and they're bright red. They're real, right? And my heart's about ready to jump out of my chest. I am scared to death. And the wheelbarrow's there. It's full of coals. You can feel the heat coming off. And so, you're like, this is the real deal. This is no smoke and mirrors deal. They're really doing this. And there's a trainer standing there. And as I'm staring into the abyss, all of a sudden he goes, eyes up. And I'm like, oh, shoot. And I bring my eyes up. Well, I guess I'm a slow learner. I'm in the room for 10 hours with Tony Robbins. Guess what he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up. Look to the end. Look to the celebration end. Don't stare at what you fear. And so now my eyes are up. And he went, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, stronger. And I went, yes. And he could tell I wasn't in a peak state. I was leaving a lot on the table. And he said, stronger. And so I threw my hands in the air and I screamed as loud as I could. And he goes, go, go, go. Boom. I took off. Well, here's the first thing I learned about firewalking, kind of metaphorically for life. When you take the first step in life, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth when you're firewalking. I guarantee you. Well, at the end of the fire lane, he has two people that lock arms and they catch you. And they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so I'm wiping my feet and I'm celebrating. And all of a sudden I go, oh my gosh, oh geez, I've burnt myself really bad. I mean, I can feel my feet are burnt. And I look at my right foot, I pull my foot up and I look at it and it's dirty, but there's no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. I pick it up, I look at it. It's dirty, but there's no burns. And so now I'm dealing with this idea that I just walked across coals that are 1,000 degrees and I didn't burn myself. And I don't have a clue how I did it. None. Right? I mean, I think we've all done something really extraordinary in life and we did it. And we go, how do we do that? But that was me, man. Here we go. I'm the guy, right? And so right there on the spot, Dwight, it was one of the most exhilarating, life-changing experiences ever. I mean, and everyone else is experiencing the same thing, right? So we got 3,500 people that are all feeling the magic of the firewalk and the results thereof. Well, here's where it gets interesting. The next day, right? This is a 4-day event. Day one is the firewalk that night. Now it's day 2. So we're all in the foyer getting ready to go into the venue. We're being staged. And I'd never seen or experienced anything remotely like this, ever. And to this day, I've never seen it except for a Tony Robbins seminar. And what that was the way people were communicating and humanistically getting along. People were laughing, they were crying, they were emotional, they're hugging, they're talking, they're sharing their story. I mean, it's intense. And so everybody's self-worth and self-confidence and self-belief had been raised, right? So our frequency was way up here now. So it was almost like a near-death experience that you experience with somebody else that connects a bond between you, the camaraderie, right? Well, that's what was going on. And that's really what got me. I was like, so is that why everybody's getting along so well? Because of the firewalk last night? And the answer is absolutely. Well, I got to know one of Tony's trainers and we got to talking. And I found out that Tony uses about 300 volunteers for a firewalk that size. So you got about 200 and some people on the inside, but he's got 50, 60, 70 people on the outside building that big fire and laying all that sod and doing all that physical work. So he said, hey, man, if you're interested, the trainer did, he said, call Robbins Research, when you get home and tell them that you're interested in crewing and they'll send you an application, fill it out, send it back. And if you're lucky, you might get chosen. Well, I did that. And I did get chosen. A couple of weeks after I sent in the application, by the way, we had to do a thing called snail mail back then.
You had to put a stamp? Oh my God.
Yeah, right. I had to put a stamp on it. Like, what the heck is that?
A lot of people won't know what a stamp is that are
that's right.
Nowadays,
right?
It doesn't exist.
Right? It's like, what? No email? What are you talking about? So, yeah, I got a letter back in the mail, Dwight, about, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after I sent it in. It said, congratulations, Dave Albin. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins companies in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And when I got down there, they take that application and, you fill in all kinds of information. And so I lived on a farm, I knew how to split wood. I knew how to use tools. I knew how to run some equipment. So they immediately put me on the fire building team. It was a perfect match. And additionally, because I had a security background and a military background, they put me on the security detail, which was there to help take care of Tony's celebrities. Well, I probably crewed, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and they actually offered me a position as a subcontractor in late 95, early 96. And so I was on the fire team. I became the assistant captain. So I was helping the guy that was running the entire thing. And then I was doing the security, with the celebrities and all that. And then in 2003, I got pulled aside at an event, and they offered me the captain's position, which meant that I would take over all of Tony's firewalks globally. And I said I couldn't do it because I homeschooled my kids. And they immediately offered me to pay for my kids to travel, on the road with me, including my wife. So there's my family in 2003 on the road with Tony Robbins, traveling all over the world. In fact, our first event was in Sydney, Australia. Well, in 2005, Tony and I set a world record. We firewalked more people at one event than any other event in the world. We were in London out on the Docklands, and we firewalked 12,300 people. Now, I want to be clear about something. Just full disclosure here. Guinness was not there. Guinness Book was not there. I say it's a world record because I truly believe it was. Nobody's come anywhere close that I know of to put on a firewalk of that magnitude, other than a Tony Robbins seminar himself. Normally firewalks are maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 people, maybe 100. I've done a couple where we're up in the 200 to 300 range, outside of Tony. But so that, again, that particular event in 2005 was, I believe, a world record. And then to kind of move this forward, my life took another really cool change and direction in 2014. And that's when Google called me and wanted to know if I was the Dave Albin that did the firewalks for Tony Robbins. Yeah, what's up? What are you guys contacting me for? And they're like, well, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you. You're the Dave Albin that does the firewalks, right? Yeah. Well, can we ask you, are you under any contractual obligation or non-compete? Could we talk to you about hiring you? I'm like, no, I'm homeboy's a free agent. I can do whatever I want. They said, cool. Like, what's the dates and what's going on? And they told me they had a graduation going on of 148 executives that were graduating through this program that the University of North Carolina had written the program for Google, and it was a graduation, and they wanted to create an extraordinary experience for that event. And so we talked about the firewalk, and we determined that it wouldn't work because they wanted it to do the event in the middle of the day. And I said, well, we could do a glass walk. And they're what? Yeah, we could do a glass walk. It's extraordinary. And they go, tell us about that. So I did, and that's what we ended up doing. And so when I got to Google, the night before the glass walk and the graduation, we're out to dinner, and North Carolina, the university people are there, and Google's there, and they're kind of like, they're like, hey, Dave, listen, can we ask you a question? And they're like, sure. And they go, well, we want to do something, but we want to make sure it's okay with you. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to do? They're like, well, you seen the movie Die Hard? I'm like, yeah, of course. They said, well, there's a scene where, they shoot out the windows and there's glass all over the floor, and Bruce Willis has to run across all that broken glass. And they're like, would you mind if we played that prior to bringing you, on stage from the green room? I'm like, no, let's do that. You're my kind of people. Absolutely, show it. And then they said, well, there's one other thing we like to do. I'm like, what's that? And they go, well, there's a song by Annie Lennox, and it's called Walking on Broken Glass. Can we play that song? And I said, sure, man. I love this. And so they did. Well, after the event, I'm at lunch with, all the grads, and a couple of them came up to me and we're just talking, and one of them says, the female said, "Hey, do you know what you have?" And I'm like, "I don't understand the question." She said, "No, you're at the top of the heap here. Corporate America is starving for corporate team building experiences like this because there's nothing else out there in the world like this. Corporate team building is, people go golfing and they go on scavenger hunts and they play
Bunch of alcohol,
blackjack.
a bunch of
What?
alcohol. There's
There's a bunch of alcohol and
let's be
and
real,
and
right?
and Fred wins the golf tournament every month because he can play and everybody else doesn't know how, and they hate Fred because he wins the damn thing. They were going, "Look, this is a paradigm shift experience. This is life changing. You can't just, you can put really great speakers on stage, but that doesn't mean they're going to change anybody's life, right? Because people forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." So what they're telling me is you probably ought to start your own business. And, we know you work for Tony, but you may want to consider putting yourself out there because there's a huge, massive marketplace for corporate team building at this level where it creates a paradigm shift and causes change. Because, we know, right? What doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. Navy SEALs don't become Navy SEALs because they sit in a desk all day and learn, man. They take them out and put them through hell. So that's when the light bulb went off. And I came back. I started Firewalk Productions. I went back to Tony and said, "Hey, man, I know after this event, I need to talk to you." And so after the event, we went in the green room and we sat and we talked for a couple of hours. And he, as soon as I started talking, he goes, "You're leaving, aren't you?" I said, "Well, I am. I'm going to go on my own. But your team's trained, Tony. You don't need me anymore. You're in good shape. You don't need me. There's a half a dozen people on that team right there on that fire team that can do what I do." And so there I was. And then from there, Dwight, from Google, next thing I know, I'm at Notre Dame, Chick-fil-A, Remax, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Heineken, Remax, the Entrepreneurs Organization. So, you just never know what's going to come. I mean, hell, the next thing I know, I'm on Give a Heck, podcast with my buddy Dwight. So, you know what I mean? So it's just been a series of things because I was willing and I had to, because my life was on the line. I had to put the plug in a jug and find a new way to live. And so AA showed me that, gave me that. And then the personal development industry just got me to where I am today.
Well, first off, you're an amazing storyteller, and your vulnerability is super appreciated by me. And I can say with honesty that many of my listeners that are loyal to listen to the show will have loved what they just heard. I know myself, I will listen to that again because there is so many nuggets of knowledge that you shared. And throughout the whole thing, the theme is the fact that you wanted more to life and things came to you. So there's so many people in life, they believe in The Secret, for an example, that you can talk things into existence. And the biggest thing is they don't take action, right? So your origin, right, which answered about 90% of what I was going to ask you, which was amazing, which I had mentioned before we hit record. I love origin stories where it literally is just, it flows, it explains and tells everything. So many people, though, they wish and they sit and they lay in bed or they sit on the couch and they get involved in addictions similar to what happened to you. And they don't realize that you can wish for things, but if you don't take action to change your current belief system and be consistent about it, you're never going to get anywhere. So it's amazing, though, like you talked about your friend reaching out to you after you lent him that, the personal power, which I do know cassette tapes. I'm not that. I got, 5 kids and 5 grandkids, and I've lived a little bit of life. So I'm familiar with personal power. I've listened to it myself. All my personal development was on cassette tapes. Similar, and the reason I bring this up is, listeners, if you are a person that's in personal development, you have a responsibility to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And meaning that, what I mean by that is sharing it with the world, letting them know how much your life has changed and putting yourself out there like Dave's done. Like we talked earlier, and how many podcasts he's been on recently. Why is he doing that? Obviously, we want to, better our own lives and make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the core of anything with somebody that shares personal development or what they've gone through being vulnerable is service. So you have a responsibility, those that are listening and watching, if you are in the personal development game and you're not sharing it with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your clients, you're doing them a disservice because you are literally not growing as much as you could by not sharing. By holding that in, yes, you're developing and changing, but you're not sharing the fact that you're changing. It's just like, it frustrates me, Dave, when people believe something in life and they find out something different. They find out a different solution, a different answer, and they propagated the same answer all the time. And they found out that they're wrong or that there's better, and they don't share it. Why? Because they don't want to be people to think, well, you used to believe this, so now you believe this. Well, yeah, I've, with some research, with support, with some other people that are farther in the journey than I am, and I want to get there. They've shared all this information, and now my life has changed, and I think I can help you. Guess what, people listening or watching? You're going to lose some people in your life when you're going through personal development. I bet you, Dave, lost some people.
Oh, yeah.
But you're looking for your tribe. You're looking for like-minded people. And I believe that so we can wish upon a star, but unless we put some action into place, I would have never met Dave. Dave mentioned he wouldn't be here if it wouldn't been for the experiences that he's gone through. Well, it's similar to me too. It's similar to where I've been in my life. I've gone through so much different things that if the pandemic wouldn't have happened, everybody was like, the pandemic was horrible. Sure, there was lots of horrible things, but I chose to not sit and wallow in it. I choose to change. I created a podcast. I wrote a book. It was all about the fact that, you know what? I don't need to be self-centered. I've done all these things to change my life, to be a single dad of 5 kids. What can I do now to serve others? I got all this time in my hands. So it's all based on service. You can't just sit and wish upon a star. And if you're a person that's God-fearing, you believe in nature, or whatever you communicate to, they'll bring people into your life. Like your buddy came into your life after you lent him a course and took you to that Tony Robbins event, right? And look where your life has gone. It's absolutely amazing. Like you talked about the fact of a young age of drinking alcohol. I was similar. I was 12 years of age. It was relatives handing me alcohol at a family event at my cousin's grad, right? Back when I was younger, I didn't even have to try sneaking it. It was just being around one of my favorite uncles. Here, have a beer. Here, have a whiskey. You can be 12, 13 years of age. And I'm serious. I'm not BSing you. I can remember the first time I got drunk, and it wasn't something that I did. I started drinking not to an extent where I drank every single day, but it was probably my 22nd or 23rd birthday where I had too much. I was hanging around a crowd of people. Now, people listening, the associations you have in life is so crucial. I had to stop hanging out with a group of people because when we did hang out, they were like, I'll buy you a shot. Oh, it's your birthday? Oh, okay. How old are you? Okay. Everybody were buying him 20 some shots. And you know what I mean? Just absolutely ridiculous. No, filter in the sense of realizing, you know what? I only need a couple drinks to get a buzz. I don't need to have 20 some where I'm puking and stuff like that. I had revelations.
Absolutely.
Right. So I can completely appreciate your story. One of the things I do want to, talk about is the actual, personal development. You've talked about the fact of how much it changed your life. And you talked about the fact that experiences are so important. People won't always remember what you talk about, but they'll remember the experience, that feeling, that joy, right, that you create within inside of them. So when you did that firewalk, you talked about the fact of that experience, what it did for you. What exactly was the experience? You talk about going across and you looked at your feet, you thought they were burning. What was the feelings after the fact that you felt, and like, how profound, how did it hit you to make it so that, like, yes, you put in that application, but there's so much more thought process that had to have occurred to you once you left that event and you were laying in bed or sitting somewhere. Can you share some of that more in detail?
Sure. Absolutely. you start to feel exhilaration the moment you finish. At the end of the fire lane, as I said, they put a couple of people there and they stop and they say, "Stop, wipe your feet and celebrate." And you know, the moment I walked on those, I remember looking back going, "What? I just walked on coals over 1,000 degrees and I didn't burn myself, and I had no clue how I did it." And I felt exhilarated. I felt like I could do anything, Dwight. I mean, I just was like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" So the payout is instantaneously, because I'm watching all these other 3,500 people and they're jumping up and down. You can see it in their face. And that's the other part of this. You know, I've seen hundreds of thousands of people firewalk. And the look on their face before they do it is total apprehension. They're scared to death. And 4 seconds later, they're exhilarated. So firewalking, the art, the science, the act, whatever, it's been around for hundreds. I've heard it's been around for over 1,000 years. So, you know, the Phoenicians, the people of India, oh my gosh, you ought to see their firewalks. It's insane. The people of Portugal, the Indo-Europeans, before they went into battle, the warriors would always do a firewalk the night before. And if you didn't firewalk, you weren't allowed to go into battle, which meant you were dishonoring your family. The Polynesians, the Hawaiians, the Native American Indians, up here where I live in the Appalachian Mountains, were the Cherokees, and they firewalked. So, you know, the experience has been around a long, long time. It just kind of depends on how you want to use it, right? Is it a rite of passage? Is it a ceremony? Is it a graduation? You know, what is it? Tony's using it for a motivational moment, because he knows that when you do that, he's got leverage on you. So when you come in that next morning, it's like, okay, hey, good morning, firewalkers. So I got a question for you. You walked across coals last night that were 1,000 degrees. What else can you do? And that's what fires it off. And he's right. And it gets you. So it gets you to start thinking outside the box. You know, you said some really cool stuff there, Dwight, like, you know, helping other people. Well, I believe that if you help enough people get what they want, you'll always get what you want. And that kind of came too from AA, because in AA, there's a thing called the preamble, right? You have the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and they read the preamble at every meeting and at meeting. And so what it says is that when anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to be there, and for that, I'm responsible. Whoa. And that, I took that to heart. I owned that. Because, you know, when somebody comes into AA, their life's on the line. This is not the Qantas Club. This is not the Chamber of Commerce. That individual right there could die easily if we don't put forth the effort. And just like I did when I came in, they were all over me. So there's a magic to that. And that just kind of spills over into what you were saying about the personal development. There's a responsibility, which I carry very heavily. I mean, I've been given, look at all I've been given. Yeah, I mean, you know, do I know the firewalking space? Yeah, I'm at the top of the food chain when it comes to that. So when they bring people to me, I have a responsibility to do everything I can to create a top 10, at least a top 10, maybe a top 5 experience in their life, because you never know where they're going to go and what they're going to do. We heard stuff all the time. You know, I remember hearing the story one time, somebody came to one of our firewalks. I don't even know where we were. But the next thing I know, apparently their family had told this individual, I guess this individual thought they wanted to create a screenplay or write a movie or whatever. And his family's like, no, you'll never be able to do that. You'll never be able to penetrate Hollywood. Like you were talking a while ago, right? Your peer group, well, love your family, choose your friends, because you will become who you spend time with, 100%. So he's listening to his family, you'll never make it. Well, he decides to go to Tony Robbins Seminar. Well, guess what he went home and did? He wrote Sleepless in Seattle, right? I've had the opportunity to see people come that transformed their life right on the spot. Years ago, we were in Tampa, and there was a young man who had a collegiate athlete, high school, and he had been hit by a drunk driver, and he lost both legs. And so his life's over. Can't run, can't jump, can't play football, can't wrestle, can't do any of it. So his whole identity was wrapped up in his sporting activities and his physical body. Well, now with no legs, that's not looking good. Well, he's suicidal. Well, one of his buddies said, hey, Tony Robbins is coming to town. You're a big fan. Why don't you go see him? And he did. So the next thing I know, it's midnight and there we are. It's dark. I can't see this kid. I don't even know he's, in the line. And all of a sudden, Tony stops and he turns back to Dwight and he looks at me. He gives this really puzzled look on his face, like, oh my gosh, I think we're going to see something really awesome here. Well, the next thing you know, there's the kid in the wheelchair. And Tony bends down to say something to him, and the kid just blows him off, like, get away. No, I got this. And sure enough, man, he had one of these, I don't know, I'll just call it a turbo wheelchair, like aluminum, titanium, whatever. He could do wheelies with it, whatever. And he rolled that thing up to that fire lane, and he positioned himself, got his torso just right, and he flipped himself forward, went into a handstand, and walked across that fire on his hands.
Whoa.
And Tony and I looked at each other and went, what? Are you kidding me? And so, you can't be part of experiences like that and it not transform your life. So yes, I have a huge responsibility to carry that, because when I walk somebody, I have no idea what they're going to do, who they're going to talk to, what they're going to go out, who knows what they're going to do or accomplish in helping make this a better world. So again, back to the AA, and for that, I'm responsible.
Oh, wow. I like how you talk about the fact that exhilaration, you talked about the fact to celebrate. That's one of the things, like, I've been in personal development since the early 90s, not as long as you, obviously, but I remember some of the first experiences I had, and leading into the 2000s, I had a gentleman by the name of Blair Singer, and it wasn't firewalking, but it was breaking arrows, right? Which was kind of a wicked experience. Yes, right here. And there was people that were terrified. I was terrified. It was like, are you kidding me? You want me to put an arrow here and break it? I'm going to be dead. I don't think I've updated my will. Right. It was like, so I haven't done the firewalk, but I've done something like that. And Blair Singer, he lives out in California. Anyway, I learned a lot from him, but one of the things he talked about was celebration. So that really resonated with me when you brought that up, that, you're done the firewalk, make sure you celebrate. Well, Blair talked about the fact he's on stage, and he was, for every single person that we had to go up and do it in, real time in front of him, and they had it on big screens, and we're breaking these arrows. And he said, when it was all said and done, he got up and he said, one of the things that we do in life is we always focus, and you mentioned this a little bit, we focus on the end, right? Which is, you talked about the eyes being up, and we focus on the end. People sit and they focus too much on all the negativity along the journey. Blair taught, and I coach about it too. Like, you know what? You have an end result that you want to hit. There's some place you want to get. Are you enjoying the experience, the journey of life? And then when you get to that, what do most people do? They don't want to celebrate too long because they think they might lose momentum. So they go on to the next thing and they forget to celebrate those wins. Even if it's a win of a firewalk or breaking an arrow, it's important that we lock into our mindset. And for some people, I remember Blair was saying, and I've taught this for years, he said, grab your hand and just go, yes. And for those listening, just do a downward moment, like, and say it out loud with some passion, so that it actually, so your brain is a giant computer. It doesn't understand the difference between the truth and a lie. So what you give it, it understands. So give it some positive energy. So I really like the fact that you brought that up, and that the fact that firewalk removes mental limits, just like me breaking that arrow was an actual deciding point for me to go along and push forward in my personal development life of, learning, understanding where I had come from, and then going out and serving others. And it isn't because, and for those listening, you don't have to be a certified coach to be an effective coach. That's another thing that, whether Dave agrees with me or not, there's so many people that have all these designations after their name in regards to being a certified whatever, or they're a rocket scientist or whatever. But that doesn't mean anything to me. That means you're book taught. What have you actually done? Is it based Is it based on reality of what you've experienced so that when you serve and teach others, it's based on connection because you can relate, you can commiserate, you can celebrate, whatever you want to say. So I like the fact you talked about removing mental limits. So many people don't realize that when they do things, like look at all the conferences. I've been to over 300 conferences in my lifetime, right? From personal development to finance, the list goes on. And how many times I think to myself, and maybe you can, give your thoughts on this. Have you ever left something and then gone back to your normal routine and you spent that 48 hours, 72 hours, and maybe you took notes or maybe you experienced something, but it wasn't really life changing. And then you go to the next one and you become a personal development junkie, or you become a conference junkie and you just go from one thing to another because there was no real defining moment. And with you talking about the firewalking and me talking about what I went through with Blair Singer with the breaking the arrows, that was where defining moments. So it was really an epiphany when you brought that up. It removes that mental limit. So, what has been your experience? Has everybody that you worked with always seen results, or is it only a small portion of the people that really effectively move forward past that experience?
Well, first of all, that arrow experience, I love it. I do it too. It's part of our company.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We do it. We do the glass walk and the arrow break and the board break, and we do we do the rebar bend too. That's where you put a piece of steel in your neck with somebody else, and then on the count of 3, 3, 2, 1, go, you walk at the same time and bend the rebar.
Wow.
So that's always fun. But I'm with you, man. Dwight, that arrow scared the hell out of me. I'm thinking, you know what? If that arrow pierces my trachea, I got a problem.
I was terrified, to be honest.
I was doing it one time, and I had a friend there, and she was an ER nurse, excuse me, ER doctor. And I said, so, hey, Dr. Stace, if that arrow pierces your trachea, what happens? And she says, well, I don't know that I can save you. But I think it's up to the individual. Again, what doesn't change us, or what doesn't challenge us doesn't change us. I think the more radical we can shake up the nervous system, the bigger the change that can happen. That's why the Firewalk's so effective. Everybody's going to get some kind of result. And I think it really depends on our attitude about it, right? Because we're in charge of the meaning that we give it. So if you make a big deal out of the Firewalk, it's a big deal. If you dismiss it like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal, well, then, guess what? Because we're all in charge of that story that we create about ourselves. Everything that happens to us, we create the story, all of it. We either embellish it or we turn it we turn it into victimhood, or we create a story that empowers us. Because you can see something that happens to two people like that are brothers, and it's just horrendous what happened to them. And one of them has an extraordinary life and the other one goes to prison. And so it really comes down to, you want to change your life, change your story, and be really careful who you spend time with. And if you are going to go to a seminar and you are going to get taught, then not just take action, take massive action. That makes a big difference. And then I think the other part of that is that we run patterns. And once you can understand how patterns work, the pattern of not getting up in the morning when you say you are, the pattern of smoking every day, the pattern of telling yourself things that aren't true, the pattern of overeating, they're all patterns, every single one of them. And so once you learn to interrupt those patterns and install a new belief system and a new pattern, that is one of the most incredible, life-changing skills you can ever come across. Because at the end of the day, life is all about one thing, if you ask me, and that's state management. How well are you managing what you think and feel on a regular basis? Because when you can do that and control it, it's a big deal. I saw an interview one time with Tom Hanks, and he's got Robert De Niro there, and there's a couple of other actors, and they're sitting at a table and talking, and they were like, so Tom, if you go back and tell your young self something, what would you tell yourself? And Tom kind of thinks for a minute, and he goes, this too shall pass. He goes, things going great. Everybody's feeling good. everything's going along, you're running on all 8 cylinders. Well, guess what? This too will pass. Things are bad. Things aren't going the way you want it to do. Everybody's ticking you off. Think like the world's crashing down around you. This too shall pass. And there's a lot of truth to that. So again, really, Dwight, from my perspective, life's pretty good, man, when you get your emotions under control, and state management's a big part of your life.
I love that. State management is be similar to what I have really been working on the last 5 years of my life, and communicating and coaching people on is literally, so you talk about state, I refer that to whether or not you have a bad day and what you tell yourself, and controlling your state of mind. How many times a day or would you hear, if you were out in the general public or you ask people how they're doing, they communicate what they say, I'm doing fine, right? They give you an automated response, or they tell you, oh, I've had a shitty day. Yet it's because we have those patterns and we have nothing to interrupt that pattern. So I personally coach people on how to never have a bad day again. And I've been working on that for 5 years. And I literally, for 5 years, can say that I have not had a bad day. And that all, for me, started after I lost my granddaughter in the spring of 2017. I knew I had to I was wallowing in self-pity. I was just living constantly in a state of depression one moment, anxiety in the next. So I was ping-ponging back and forth in life, and telling people and telling myself I had a bad day, and discounting the fact is something as simple as appreciation for waking up and having another shot to be able to better my life, to have so many great people around me. And I'd have things that went on great during the day, and I'd be in a high. One thing would happen. And what was my response? That was pattern taught to me by society. I'm having a bad day. And as I program myself and I run that computer program over and over again, I jump on the hamster wheel of life that I talk about to people and didn't know how to get off. So once I figured out the fact that I can control my state of what I think, I learned timeout principle. I learned different things that I can literally do to, not have a bad day anymore. So I like the fact you talked about changing your state. And it's
and the other part of that I find very valuable, and I hope your listeners will too. This is a big one, man. This has really, really helped me in my life. And that is when I learned to trade my expectations for appreciation.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
Our expectations are so high though nowadays, and it's not even, I'm so tired of people saying it's a generational thing from, baby boomers to Generation Z to X to Y and millennials, all this other garbage. You know what? We all have too high of expectations. We deflect and point at another generation that's younger or older because we don't want to admit our own faults.
That's right.
Our own, weakness.
100%.
Right? It's time that we as a society stand up and say, no matter what your age is, you deserve to have more out of life. And here's how I can help you. Let's start out with baby steps and be consistent. And then once you develop specific positive patterns, these are what we're going to do to help you keep those patterns and not fall backward into addictions. And it's not, again, addictions, you can probably maybe agree, disagree. Addictions aren't just drugs and alcohol. Addictions can be to sadness, to anger, to, so many different, you can be addicted to being verbally abusive to people, right? We need to help people break those addictions. And once they realize them, understand the things that can trigger and pull them back. Just like you mentioned, the fact of easily starting to drink again, right? It could have easily happened, but things happen. People came into your life from AA. You were held accountable to continue on the course correction and go forward. We all have a responsibility to every generation of any age to make sure we share what we're going through and help other people understand it if they're obviously willing, and keep them on a path of course correction, right? To constantly stay, just like a plane has a co-pilot for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Course
and a plane is always, a plane is what? it's always having to re-navigate, right? Because it's always off course.
1 degree, it's like 60 miles. It's
That's
like,
right. Exactly.
it's
Right. I love that.
unbelievable, right?
Yeah. I love
So,
that.
you know, man, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm blessed. I honestly am, because there's a lot of commonalities that you and I have. We could
Yeah.
probably have a whole day conversation. We could have a series just on talking, because you know, it's great to find people with commonalities that have been through struggles. There's similarities, though we both have had a different journey in life. We've had
Yeah.
commonalities. We've got similarities of, and you know, at the end of the day, it's never too late to, and people chuckle, but it's true. It's never too late to give a heck. Like, I look at what you've gone through and your experiences, Mike, like, brother, you've gone and given a heck multiple times. You are what I tell people in life. We get to a point where we're successful, and it doesn't mean money success. It means whatever your definition of success is. I know people that are janitors that are so happy, and you know, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're not a multimillionaire. Their definition of success is what they're happy is, and there's nothing
Right.
wrong with that. But so many people get stuck in a plateau mentally, and they literally stop climbing and they camp. And literally, you have never stayed, you know, once you had that realization way back when, and with your first experience with personal power, I see a transgression where you constantly are on the climb. You never stay camped. And kudos to you. I tell
Thank you.
people I'm going to be on that same adventure, that same climb, till I take my last breath. Well, aren't you ever going to be satisfied? And I ask you that question, Dave. Are you ever going to be satisfied? I know I'm not.
Well, here's the thing. You know, the more you want, the more trapped you get into it, right? You know, people wanting, you know, I want this, I want that. Well, that can become a really dangerous treadmill to get on. I think people can a lot of times confuse achievement with fulfillment, right? So they've achieved at a high level. I do a lot of events for the entrepreneur organization, and they're all very successful entrepreneurs. We did 5 events last year alone. And so I've been in front of hundreds and hundreds of very, very successful entrepreneurs. And I tell them, look, let me tell you something. You're not going to get to the end of your life and go, wow, I wish I'd have spent more time working and less time with my family. That's not going to happen. And Tony Robbins says it. He goes, you know, there's an art and a science to achievement versus fulfillment. Because if you achieve at a high level and you don't feel fulfilled, that's total failure. So you got to get that part figured out. Now, and, you know, money's important. I get that. You know, who was it? Zig Ziglar said maybe that it ranks right up there with oxygen when it comes to money.
Yeah.
And I do know that if you have enough money, it will only solve all your money problems. But all your problems aren't related to money.
Of course.
Right. So yeah, absolutely.
But that's what I mean.
Man.
No, I mean, you know, I'm going to constantly be on the climb. Just, you know, for my listeners, especially those that know me already, I mean, I'm never going to stop wanting to work on my 6 inches between my ears.
Yeah, good for you.
Money is not the end all be all. Like you said, it can solve your issues. I have people that are worth, like, we're talking into the triple digits of the 7 figures, and they're miserable. People that I know.
I've seen it too. I've been to enough seminars with Tony,
I love
man.
it. Fulfillment is
it's everything.
What I'm talking about. And I don't mean that I won't ever be fulfilled. I mean that till I take my last breath, I'm always going to be on the climb to increase my knowledge base, and understanding that something that worked for me a year ago might not work today. Something could have changed, and now I need to pivot my mindset. And I don't want to be that person that's in my, you know, like my parents in their mid 80s. You know, you get to a point where they aren't necessarily on the climb. They're not necessarily wanting to, they're just, no, I don't even want to say they're stuck in a rut. They're just they're in a level of life where they want to just coast, and that's fine. Myself, once I've been bitten by the personal development bug, once I've been bitten by all the positive influence of the tribe of people I hang out with, I would never want to have that not be in my life. And I'd rather go, go up to heaven, which I believe in, taking my last breath, knowing that I served others. But the most important person that we tend to forget is serving ourselves, right?
For
Because in
sure.
order to serve others appropriately, we have to always serve. So if I believe on setting up, working on my legacy till the day I take that last breath, I want my grandkids, my kids, all the people in my tribe around surrounding me, knowing that I always was on the rise in the sense of wanting to develop and be the best version of me. Because and whether or not a person agrees with me or not is that's the joys of life. We all have different opinions and thought processes, but I know myself, I'm going to personally develop and want to continually work on this 6 inches between my ears until the day I do take my last breath. And it's nothing to do with money.
Well, yeah, like I said, money will solve, enough of it will solve all your money problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
100%.
and I know we could talk for days, and but one other thing I'll say, and that is, um, there's a real magic in realizing that you're on this planet for a reason. And I believe the two most important moments in anyone's life is the moment they were born and the moment they figure out why.
Yeah. And they're back to the purposeful life. And my mantra that I literally, it never really dawned on me until 2020, till the pandemic, why I've been telling people, I'm going to, help you live life on purpose and not by accident, because so many of us don't know what our purpose is. We don't know why we were born, right? Well, what was I born for? Was, everything in my life is negative. I kind of seem to attract anything positive, and it's again back to pattern teaching. Maybe it happened from their families to them.
Sure.
It literally keeps on going, just like yourself. But someday something's gonna come to you. Those listening or watching, something's gonna come to you, and you just have to understand: are you willing to go through what it takes to evoke change in your life, to break the patterns that are making you sad or angry all the time? And maybe it's, you've been praying to the universe, praying to God, and all of a sudden somebody like Dave shows up to his buddy and says, here, take my personal power cassettes and listen to this. You were a catalyst for change for that, man. And then it came back to you full circle when he took you to that event.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you brought credence to
Right?
that. That was a big part of it.
Exactly. So it's back to what we talked about earlier. Always be on the climb to change yourself, but bring people along for the ride.
Always.
Always
Absolutely.
bring people along for the ride. And, as you mentioned, when you share and help enough people, you're always taken care of anyway.
Right. Yeah. You help enough people get what they want, you'll always get what you want.
Yeah.
Always.
Sometimes it'll be buckets full of just gladness and joy plus money, and other times it's just going to be appreciation and joy that you get back. And you can satiate yourself with both. One's going to satiate you and keep you on the climb with happiness. You'll go to bed with gratefulness and gratitude. You'll wake up with the same. The other one, like you said, just pays bills.
Yeah.
It doesn't get you what you need. So Dave.
Well, yeah. Well,
Sorry.
Dwight, thank you, man. This has been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
You're killer in this space, and it's been a real honor and a pleasure to come and meet you and talk with you. I feel like I've known you my whole life, and hopefully we added some value to your listening audience.
Absolutely. So I'm going to wrap up the show here. Dave, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Stop looking for heroes and be one. Just own it. And, know you're here for a reason, and just own who you are and show up every day and be accountable. Maybe get an accountability coach if you need that. And just start taking care of yourself in every area of your life. And your life will become spectacular, absolutely magnificent.
Sweet. Thank you. That's a great last closing message. So our time is almost up. I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you as well?
Sure.
I would like you to also talk about your event coming up here in the next couple months, or I believe it's in June here in regards to your Firewalk. So share any information about what's going on with you as well as how they can contact you.
So the easiest way to contact us is very simple through our website, which is www.firewalkadventures.com. That's all one word, firewalkadventures.com. And then when you get there in the top left corner, there's the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. And the Academy is designed to train people that want to come to us. It can be trainers or coaches or CEOs or entrepreneurs or business owners, whatever. And they want to come, and I'll train them on all the things that I do. And they can go and take all those skills and all those experiences back into their respective businesses and facilitate it on their own. We only put 10 people through the Academy at a time. And we do that very specifically because it's very intimate. You're going to spend a lot of time with me personally. And so we do it 10 people at a time. And the code, if you do go and you look at that and you go, wow, you know what, I really want to do that for being on your podcast here today, Dwight, I'm going to give you a code. And if you give us that code when you contact us after we do a discovery call and make sure it's a good fit for you, if you apply that code that I give you today, we'll give you a substantial discount. And that code is 6828. And that'll bring recognition to being on the Give a Heck podcast today.
Sweet. I will make sure that goes in the show notes. Listeners and people watching that are new to the show, just go to giveaheck.com and click on the podcast portal button. It'll come up. You'll see a picture of Dave, and you can read the show notes below. And if anything doesn't make any sense, obviously you can reach out to me as well, and I can connect you up with Dave, because opportunities take you taking the risk to actually be willing and step out of your comfort zone, because there's nothing in my life that has equaled success that was inside my comfort zone. It was always outside of it. So appreciate you, Dave. Thanks again for being on the show. And,
my pleasure.
It was fantastic. So I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.